So, welcome back. Another session on mindfulness and exploring a few of the concepts of mindfulness, a few of the meditations. So, Anne and I have just been listening to the breath-based body scan meditation, which you can find on SoundCloud like the rest of the meditations here, and they are freely available to anybody who wants to listen to those. This meditation's from Mindfulness for Health by Vidya Marla Birch. So have a look out for that one if you'd like to do the breath-based body scan as well. So you might have already done it. You might want to stop now and have a go at it. If you're not going to do it right now, then the basics of the meditation is that it encourages you to focus on your breath whilst also traveling round the body and just really getting into different parts of the body and how they feel, including areas like the diaphragm and the back of the ribs, and places where perhaps you might not ordinarily think about. Yeah, quite a good one to do to get you into into the flavour of things. So Anne was about to make a good comment about it before we press recording. So if you can just kind of paraphrase what you said, just straight after the meditation.
Yes. I like this particular meditation. I like the whole body idea of looking at all the parts of your body, what's happening to them, however slight the movement, when you're breathing in and out. But I find that's the one that I'm able to keep my mind on, my awareness on. My mind doesn't wander. Some of the others, it will wander, and you gently bring it back to what you're concentrating on. But because you're on the move through your body and you're conscious of thinking about your back, your shoulders, you're right down to your fingers and thumbs, and then up to your neck, and then down again to your feet and your toe. You've got to keep your mind on where it's going next and what it's following. And I find that one a really good meditation, because you don't want, well, I don't wander easily from what I'm doing because it's constantly changing. So you've got to be thinking of something else and where you're going next. I find that a really good one, a good overall meditation. And when I finished, having just done it, when you finished, I feel as though I've been really relaxed for an extended period of time. And when you come back into the world, there's a lovely restful sensation. That's my personal view.
Yes, yeah, me too. Yeah, because I think because the mind does wander so easily, we often connect to the breath in meditations, but because it's just been giving one thing to think about, if you're just focusing on your breath and rising and falling of your stomach and so on, the mind can easily flit away, like the butterfly landing on different leaves. But if it's moving around, I find that a really good anchor as well, for my focus. It's not that my mind doesn't wander, because it does, that's a human condition, isn't it? But
yes, it is.
A couple of things that Vidya Marla Birch says during the mindfulness caught my attention. So she was saying that when you bring focus to an area and the breath's reaction in that area, that itself is naturally calming. And I think, that's kind of reflected in what we're saying, is that by taking the breath and the effect of the breath around the body, you do automatically relax and find calmness in those areas. I think that's quite powerful by doing that. And she asks a question during the meditation, do you find that your muscles naturally soften in the light of awareness? So, yeah, if you bring your attention to the jaw, for example, which is a place we hold an awful lot of tension, clenching our teeth. But as soon as we start to give attention to the jaw, then we automatically release that tension. I know that resonates for me. And I can have had a really tight jaw and not be aware of it, but bringing the attention there, automatically makes it soften. And in that meditation, I found that as you take the focus around the body, then it automatically releases some of the tension. Yeah.
Relaxes.
And another thing that she said at the end of the meditation was also, so we've been wandering around the body and noticing its effects on the breath. And then she says at the end, just a little something to think about, is that just notice that your thoughts and emotions are constantly changing, a bit like the breath. The breath keeps going and it keeps changing, slightly longer breaths, slightly slower breaths, shallower, deeper. And her observation is that thoughts and emotions also constantly change, like the breath, or sometimes it's likened to like the clouds in the sky. So, and that's something we'll be picking up on again during this session. So a good way to kind of introduce yourself to the concepts there. So last time we were talking about a lot of things. One thing that we touched on, but I'd like to revisit a little bit, is about autopilot, because we mentioned autopilot last time. So perhaps we'll just recap on what our understanding is of autopilot and kind of how is that relevant to mindfulness. So do you want to kick off, Anne?
Yes, by all means. Autopilot actually is a very good way of being able to let your mind wander while you're actually going through the process of doing tasks and sequences of actions that you do on a daily basis. Getting up, coming down, putting the kettle on, filling the kettle, putting the kettle on, getting the teapot, making your tea. You don't actually, you're so used to doing that your mind can do other things. You're actually giving your mind chance to wander. And it's not good it's really not good for us. And it's times like that when when something interrupts the autopilot, that things can go wrong, because we shouldn't be relying upon that. For example, I have had an interruption from my autopilot in the morning, and I've gone out of the house and left the front door unlocked. Just walked out and come back and had a lovely surprise. Well, not a lovely surprise, because first of all, I thought somebody's in the house, but no, it was me. And then I had to think back, why did I do that? Oh, because I was interrupted from my autopilot. So I am very conscious of that fact. I still do things. You still find the shortest way to get a task done. Oh, this is good, so I'll do this on a regular basis. But essentially, we do need to be much more mindful of our daily processes and what we do, and listen and stop and pay attention to things. And it will stop then these bizarre happenings, because I've done it before, bizarre happenings when you go through autopilot and then one thing interrupts it and then it all goes to pot. So there's a lot more. It can be quite detrimental, our autopilot, for lots of reasons.
Yeah, like going away and leaving your front door open.
Yeah.
Yes, or all sorts of losing things, or taking the wrong turning because you're on autopilot, and your autopilot's taking you to somewhere when actually you were supposed to be driving somewhere else.
Yeah.
And as you say, Anne, about what your mind wants to do is it wants to just wander off and churn over stuff while your body is doing a routine task. And the trouble with the wandering mind, as we've already started to realize, is that the wandering mind tends to take us towards places that can be stressful, like worrying about the future or ruminating over things that have happened. Oh, somebody said something in a particular way, and oh, does that mean they don't like me anymore? Or should I have done something differently? Or, worries about the past, worries about the future, playing things over and over again, which is stressful, and it's not the most productive way to live our lives. So, being in the present a bit more is better for mental health, and it gives us a sense of this is the moment that we're living in, and we can make the most of that moment. Whereas when we're on autopilot, we don't, because our minds are not there; they're somewhere else. So autopilot, a concept that crops up time and time again in mindfulness, and yes, it has its uses. It enables us to get routine things done, but can also be quite a detrimental way to live for those reasons. Okay, so some more concepts then coming up. So another concept then. So on autopilot, we can tend to react in habitual ways. We act the same way to things that crop up because our autopilot takes us there. So somebody pushes in front of us in the queue, we react with annoyance and stress and so on, because autopilot, just that's how you do it. That's how you've always done it. But in mindfulness, one of the concepts is about having choices about the way we react or respond to things that happen to us in life. Like if somebody pushes in front of us in the queue. So we could go on autopilot and just let autopilot take over and do whatever we normally do in response to that. Or we can choose to respond to what happens, responding mindfully. So an example from some of the materials that we're working with then, a train's late, and we can go on autopilot and just rant and rave about how rubbish the British Rail is, and how annoying it is and how it's going to ruin your day, and start to feel angry because you've been thwarted. Your plans were to meet your friend at such and such a time. Now that's all gone to pot, and blah, blah, blah. It can then affect the way that we speak to other people. Somebody from the railway comes onto the platform, and then they get an earful from people because they're annoyed about, well, why is the train late and what are you doing about it? And that can affect your relationships with others. If you're angry, you're doing that, somebody with you, you might be sharp with them as well. And emotions can escalate and make you and everybody around you feel a lot worse. Or we could respond mindfully in that situation by just being aware of the situation and noticing how autopilot would have us respond. And then we can make choices about how to respond differently. So in that sort of situation, mindful way to respond might be to take a step back, to think, actually, there's nothing I can do about it. And I'm here in this moment, and over there, we've got some blue sky I can look at. Or I've got something that I can listen to on my headphones, or I can start up a chat with somebody, or I can make productive use of my time. I can do a bit of meditation. I can start to feel the ground beneath my feet. I can start to look around my body, see if there's any areas of tension and loosening those, or so on. So, Anne, I don't know if any examples are springing to your mind while I'm talking
Well, it's
about
really it's really strange, because the railway experience actually very similarly happened to me, but I started to be mindful beforehand, because I had booked a train to Manchester Airport, and I'd got to catch 2 trains. I'd got to go to Crewe, and then I'd got from Crewe to Manchester, and I'd got a heavy rucksack, a big suitcase, and a bag. And the tickets gave me 10 minutes to get from one side of Crewe station to the other. Now, I only know it was from one side to the other because in my anxiety about it all, I thought, I'm not going to get across the stats. That 10 minutes isn't long enough to get across. So I had my moment of anxiety, and I got quite worked up, and I thought, now, hang on a minute, there's got to be a way to deal with this situation. I know what I'll do. I'll go and speak to somebody at Wolverhampton station, which was where I was catching the train in the first place, and I'll discuss these issues with him, and we'll sort it out. And in actual fact, that's exactly what I did. And I told him 10 minutes I didn't feel was long enough for me to get to the lift, to push the button and all this business and manhandle all this stuff across from one side to the other. And he said to me, but we've worked this out. It's exactly 10 minutes. It won't take you any longer than that. It's all being worked out. And I said, yes, but what if the first train is late? I need to be able to do this quite calmly. I said, and I don't want to be harassed, and I don't want to be anxious. I want to be able to enjoy the experience. Oh, in that case, he said, you've got a ticket. You can catch any train. There's one that's coming in within the next 10 minutes, and that'll give you 20 minutes at Crewe station. And I think it's exactly what I needed. And when I did look up, the train that I should have caught was 6 minutes late, and it would have only given me 4 minutes to change from one platform to the other, which wouldn't have been enough time. So I tried to think and process it before I even got into the situation that I would be getting worked up. But he was quite understanding, the man I spoke to, he was quite understanding about it. And he realised that, yes, that's one way. That's one way to be helpful. Let's change the station. So then the whole change the platform, change the train. And I sat there and on the train, and I was able to enjoy the whole process and do a little bit of mindfulness as well. But I'd thought about it, and I did start to get quite anxious when I saw that. And I thought, well, I've got to catch this train. There's nothing I can do. I'll catch it even earlier. And then I would have had 4 or 5 hours at the airport if everything had worked. And I thought, no, I'll go in. I'll have a reasonable discussion. And I was very lucky because the man was very helpful. But it is taking a step back. Whichever process you use, whichever way you do it, you take a step back and you think, which is going to be, what way is going to be the most comfortable, the most rewarding, and the anxiety can build up very quickly. I would be the first to admit it. I can be quite anxious, but the mindfulness bit, how are we going to sort this? What are we going to do? And I mean, that it was just amusing that this was the example given, because I thought, yes, I've got an example of that.
Very topical. Yeah.
And it's true, that is, you can, and people, well, the one thing is noise, because noise can be quite annoying at times. And, there've been a lot of, well, I think you've had the same, Claire, there's been a lot of people having new driveways, there's a lot of digging, there's a lot of slab cutting going on, and it's quite grating, and sometimes you have to just sit there and you can hear it because there's nowhere to escape it. So you have to see it as part of what's going on that day, and do some breathing and let it all float away.
Yes. Responding
have to do,
mindfully. Yeah,
yeah,
when you can't
you
actually
have
do
to,
anything to change it.
no,
Yeah.
and you have to do that quite actively. You have to be actively mindful in
Yes.
order to allow that to go on without getting worked up about it.
Yes, because autopilot will automatically kick in and it'll react
Yeah.
in a habitual way, which may well be cursing people who are outside our windows, making a racket, disturbing our day.
And the
So,
only
yeah.
ones who suffer that, you're the only one who suffers from that behaviour. It's you that gets all worked up because
Yeah.
you're in the you're aggressive and you're angry, and it doesn't do you any good at all.
Yeah. So, and then following on from that, you just talked about making yourself suffer then by responding in a habitual way. So primary and secondary experience and suffering is another useful concept in mindfulness. So we tend to resist unpleasant situations or experiences. So we don't want people digging things outside our house and making a racket. We tend to resist them. That's understandable, but not particularly helpful, because in a lot of situations we actually have very little control. If your neighbour wants to do their drive, then they will. And the more you resist, as you say, the more you cause yourself with suffering. So in mindfulness, an explanation for that can be that we've got primary experiences, and that is the suffering that's a direct experience of something unpleasant. So somebody's drilling outside your house, making a racket. That's the primary experience. And there can be a certain amount of instantaneous suffering from that. I mean, suffering is quite a strong word, but, unpleasantness, something you would rather not have. And secondary experience is then, how do you react to it? And in many cases, the secondary experience can actually be far worse than the primary one. So the primary one of having a din outside your house, the radio going, men shouting, all women, etc. And then our secondary experience of clenching, going tight in our bodies, letting our adrenaline pour, maybe going out there having a go at them about the noise they're making, maybe arguing with your neighbours, etc., etc. That is actually just causing things to spiral and to cause a lot more suffering than you would have done just from the original source of it. So, yeah. So we've just given an example of a situation there, and primary and secondary suffering. So if we react mindfully in that situation, then we reduce our overall suffering, because we're choosing not to let it make us suffer. Another concept that comes into it, difference between feelings and emotions. So sometimes we think, well, feelings and emotions are the same thing, but in mindfulness, it helps us to distinguish between feelings on one hand, emotions on the other way, to help us to make choices. So feelings are what experiences feel like, the initial, I feel irritated by that noise that's going on outside. But then emotions are, well, what do we do with those feelings? So there's a bit of suffering going on because somebody's drilling outside my window. Do I choose to let myself get angry and to go into secondary experience and suffering? So the theory is, well, we can't choose our feelings, because as soon as something happens, we have an automatic response to that. But we can then choose our emotional response. So how do we then respond to that situation? So if we're delayed, as you said, Anne, on your train journey, you could have not thought mindfully about that in the first place, just gone into your train journey, be watching the clock. Oh no, the train's a minute late, it's 2 minutes. now I didn't think 10 minutes was enough to get from A to B, and now I've only got 4 minutes to do it, and that really
Yeah.
isn't enough. And now I'm absolutely stressed and tight, and I might start running, and all sorts of things might happen as a result of that. So if we're delayed, we can react, or we can respond and accept the situation with good grace, which is quite hard to do, isn't it, sometimes?
It is hard to do, because you also get people who would say, well, that's all right, but people will take advantage of you if you behave like that. If you don't respond, give as good as you get. I think that's a terminology that if you don't give as good as you get, you'll be walked all over. People will take advantage. But you've got to equate that with how you feel and keeping an equilibrium going in your body, because essentially that's going to be better for you than the antagonism. It's going to be more calming, it's going to be more relaxing, and essentially that's what you need. That's what you need to be. That's the way you need to be able to go through life to cope with what can be very difficult situations. You need to be able to step back, and mindfulness is a wonderful process, if you like, of making you step back, but not only step back to actually do something that is positive and that helps all these difficulties that come to you to be managed more effectively and to give you peace of mind.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think we are encouraged by society. Oh, you've got to fight your corner, and like you say, if you don't, then people will think that you're a pushover or what have you. But in the train example, getting angry, well, are you a pushover to who? The railways, or there is nothing you can do about it, and getting angry doesn't make you any less of a pushover, or it just makes you an angry person.
Yes, you're the one. I was going to say you're the one that suffers. The trains don't, because they do just what trains do. They run to their timetable or a bit behind their timetable, and that's it. And they're unaware of what you're going through.
That's right. Yeah. So it's interesting, isn't it? So I mean, it's good stuff. It's something that takes a little bit of time to work with, isn't it? It's and I don't know about you, Anne, but I find that with mindfulness, I mean, we've said before, it's like a muscle that you have to keep using, really, to get used to using it and to strengthen it up, and to start doing that instead of reacting on autopilot, or to load on the secondary suffering. But it is something that with time you do then start to actually be able to take a step back, and I suppose that's that is probably the most important thing to do, to be able to take a step back.
That's right. You need to do what's good for you, and getting worked up and getting anxious, getting angry, none of that is good for you.
No, and it's not good for people around you either, is it? No. So that's where we're going to have to leave it for today. Short but sweet, but hopefully, a few more things to have a think about, and to give a little practice to as you're going through your daily life, and when things crop up, maybe having something to make you think, actually, I can have a choice about what I do about that. And to practice the muscle of getting off autopilot, then focusing into the body, focusing into the breath, is a way of drawing out of the head, the autopilot, down into the body, and enabling us to experience right here, right now, what's really happening right here, right now. And we can do that in lots of situations, you know, so we can do it in meditation, but we can also do it when we're eating, when we're in the shower, you know, as we've said before, when we're driving, when we're walking along. So best of luck with your practice this week, and we will be back with more next week. So Leslie will be with me next week. Anne's going on her holidays, but Anne will be back with us very soon.
I will indeed.
Thank you very much, Anne.
It's a pleasure.